Did you even grow up in Ireland if the Corsa wasn't a staple in Irish motoring, maybe even a car you learned how to drive in? Opel have done one of the most memorable radio campaigns in motoring circles for quite a few years with the "Yes, of Corsa" radio ads. Whether they wrecked your head or made the car stick in your mind, the job was done. Well, here it is, the updated version of the Opel Corsa, which has a lot going for it if you like small little city cars and you don't need something huge and SUV-like and something that's hard to park and get disapproving looks on the school run. This is a small little B-segment car that now looks probably better than ever. It's got some nice red paint action going on with a two-tone black roof, LED lights onto the back. The Opel badge and Corsa is obviously in black lettering. There is two different types of petrol options. You can get a 1.2 without a hybrid or a 1.2. That is not a plug-in hybrid, however, it's just a mild hybrid, so it assists with the engine at certain times of your driving and it's not flawless. I'll get into that on the drive. On this GS trim, there's a nice black boot spoiler also. The black two-tone begins at the A-pillar and goes right the way up into the roof. Black mirror housing. And these two-tone diamond cut 16-inch alloy wheels, which offer a lot of comfort actually because they're not huge and not sitting on elastic bands. So no doubt then, if you want the sporty version, you need to go for the GS, which is obviously the most expensive. You're talking not far off €32,000 for this version of the car, but it starts at 25. And there's also the little small issue of a Peugeot E208, which is better looking, has more power, and is fully electric for less money. Really white, crisp white headlights, the Opel visor front on the nose with this groove up the bonnet. 309 litres down here, which is quite acceptable. It's a little bit bigger than something like the Ford Fiesta, which Ford have killed for some strange reason. But you have things like the bigger Renault Clio now, which is quite a bigger car, to be fair. A lot bigger than you might expect the Clio to be in years gone by. That has quite a bigger boot and something like a Skoda Fabia as well. It's a bit of a struggle, but you do get there in the end. So there is an actual spare space saver tyre here, which is handy if you get caught out, and there's this boot liner which keeps things clean and makes sure your carpet is nice and protected for the next owners. It's like this neighbour I used to have. They'd buy a new car every January. They'd leave the plastic covers on the seats and never take them off during their ownership of the car, and you'd wonder who was that for. Tightened up on the back of the Corsa also. This model obviously gets these racing stripes up the middle of the car in grey and white. Not bad. Foot space and leg space if you can put this passenger seat fairly far forward. Just for comparison, there's the driver's seat and I'm not even 6 foot tall. And head height is okay once you're inside the car, but if you're getting out, there's a big lip there, so I'd avoid that. You get the idea. Oh, and don't be expecting to charge anything back here because there's nothing to do that with. It's no bad place in the Corsa when you're up here. Nice materials used. Steering wheel is quite large actually for this size of car, but lots on it, including buttons to everything, buttons to climate control. If you're someone who hates non-stop screen action, then you'll like it. If you want to use your phone nav apps, that's the only thing you can do because you have to plug in or wirelessly stream CarPlay or Android to get nav. Decent sized screen. Materials used don't feel cheap. Driver instrument screen is also good. There's a few different options where you can change things on that. Just one USB-C and a 12 volt up front. Be nice to have two. What is nice is an armrest. A lot of cars of this size you don't get that. So very welcome to have one in the car. The seats are very comfortable. In fairness to Opel, they really do pride themselves on comfortable seats. Good bolsters on this GS trim version of the car also. There's a couple of options when it comes to the petrol lineup in this car. So there's a 75 brake horsepower manual. That's the entry point into the Corsa. This car is 100 brake horsepower with the mild hybrid. There's just a standard petrol 1.2 That's also 100 brake horsepower. That will have an 8-speed automatic gearbox, and then this mild hybrid version has a 6-speed manual gearbox. So I wouldn't say it's convoluted, but there's certainly choice for just about everybody. Now I do feel the 75 brake horsepower might be a little bit underwhelming in terms of power delivery, but this is quite good. This has enough brake horsepower, and once you're on the power, you can nip this thing in and out of corners very, very well. It handles well, it's light, it's agile, it's got all the positive traits in many ways when it comes to a B segment city car. You know, it really does handle very well and is quite enjoyable to drive. However, and there is a however, so the transition from mild hybrid to petrol in this car isn't always the smoothest, and whether that's crawling on the M50 or just crawling in stop-start traffic, it can get a little bit jerky, a jerky journey. And equally, when you're braking from speed in particular, and again, that stop-start traffic on maybe the M50 would be a good example, it can give you a little bit of regen and then friction brake, and it's just not very smooth how it changes from one to the other, and it can get just a bit tiresome. But it's got lots of grip. As I said, it's lovely in the corners. The steering has got a good bit of feedback to it, and it's got a nice mix of city centre lightness, and then, you know, just a little bit of weight to it as well. Our 3-cylinder engine likes to be wound up. Despite all that, then, you'll return about 5.2 litres per 100 kilometres in this mild hybrid version of the car, at least, which is pretty much on a par as to what you might expect from a Toyota Yaris, let's say. As I mentioned earlier on in the review, because it's not sitting on really large wheels with very little tyre rubber, it's quite nice over imperfect roads, bumps, ramps. Quite rewarding to drive. I just wish the transition, as I mentioned in the hybrid, was a little bit better tuned. But do I think you should go right ahead and buy a new Corsa if you're looking for a small city car? Or should you be considering something else? It is an expensive car. Not long ago, you could buy a Golf for this price. It's not really an Opel thing. It's just a car prices thing over the last few years. I do have to mention its closely related cousin, however, which is the Peugeot E208. It's a better looking car, and for less money than the top spec in this, you can get the top spec fully electric version with 136 brake horsepower. And that's a lot of car, which will be cheaper than this to run. Now, if you want to look at the entry-level Corsa at about €25,000, there's a bit more value there. It's just anything with a 30-plus price tag and this size of car sets off alarm bells in my head. And as much as it's a well-put-together little car, it's just too much money in GS trim. You could get an entry-level Astra for the same price as the top spec in one of these. And even that doesn't make sense, Opel. So, is it a of Corsa verdict? Well, if you want to drop down a couple of trims and not look at anything else. If you do, then it's maybe not of Corsa. Thanks for watching. Talk to you in the next one.